So I was at a dinner last week, table of 4, proper face-to-face chat. And suddenly my friend right across from me, he just stops mid-sentence. Yeah, he glances down, pats his pocket, pulls out his phone, looks totally confused. And then he just goes, I could have sworn that vibrated.
Ah, the classic moment.
Exactly. Puts it away, looks a bit sheepish, tries to get back to the story. But then maybe 30 seconds later, I feel it, that this in my pocket.
What, a little jolt.
Yeah. So I reach down, pull out my phone, and just like his, nothing. Blank screen, no notification, no call, zip. It's like this weird shared hallucination we all just accept now.
It really is. Like a ghost in the pocket. But the ghost isn't in the phone, is it? It's somewhere in us.
That's it. Why are our brains doing this, sending these fake alerts? And what's it mean that we're all sort of waiting for a call that isn't even coming?
Well, you've hit on it perfectly. It's this really modern phenomenon, isn't it? It shows just how deep this cognitive link, this attachment to our devices actually goes. Our brains are literally inventing sensations.
It's wild. We're talking about something lots of people feel. Kind of error in perception that shows how tangled up our nervous system is with these little boxes we carry.
Precisely. And that's what we want to dig into for you today. This deep dive is all about unpacking that. Right. We're looking at, 3 main things.
Okay.
First, the sort of cognitive and psychological reasons behind these phantom feelings. Then, the behaviors driving at things like stress, maybe problematic phone habits.
Right.
And finally, we'll look at how designers have tried and maybe not quite succeeded to fix this with smarter notifications, smarter haptics.
Sounds good. Let's get into it.
Okay, so scientifically, what you and your friend felt, that's phantom vibration syndrome, or PVS. If you hear a ringtone that isn't there, that's phantom ringing syndrome, PRS.
Right. PVS and PRS. I've also heard some funnier names.
Oh, yeah. Researchers, and probably everyone else, call them vibranxiety and ringxiety, which are kind of perfect, right?
They really are. But they also point to something maybe a bit unsettling. Like historically, if you told a doctor you were feeling things or hearing things that weren't there.
That was a big deal. A clinical symptom, often pointing towards some kind of significant psychological issue.
Exactly. But PVS and PRS just don't seem to fit that mold anymore, do they?
Not at all. And that's why they're so interesting. They're basically the textbook example of what psychologists now call a normative hallucination.
Normative hallucination. That sounds like a contradiction in terms.
It does, doesn't it? But think about the numbers. Study after study shows huge percentages of people experience this. Maybe up to, 82% of the general population?
82%.
Wow. And in groups that are really plugged in, like college students, it could be even higher, maybe 83%. So when you have 4 out of 5 people feeling these phantom buzzes,
it stops looking like a personal problem or a symptom of illness.
Exactly. It shifts. It becomes part of the common, everyday human experience in our, super connected world. It's not pathology. It's just what happens now.
Okay, so if it's not an illness, it must be some kind of processing error, right? Like a glitch in how our brain handles incoming information. Why does my brain mistake my shirt rubbing against my skin for my phone vibrating?
That's where the hypothesis-guided search theory comes in. It's actually a pretty neat idea about how the brain deals with just the sheer amount of sensory information hitting us all the time.
Like sensory overload.
Totally. Think about it. The feeling of your clothes, background noises, tiny little muscle twitches, it's constant. The brain can't possibly pay conscious attention to all of it.
So it has to filter, it has to decide what's important.
Right. And it does that using filters, or what you call schemas, based on what it expects to find, what it anticipates is coming.
Okay, like if I'm waiting for an important email, my brain is sort of primed for that notification.
Exactly. It's like you've told your brain, okay, prioritize anything that feels like a phone vibration. Because we're often really invested in getting that message. That expectation is strong.
So the brain takes this vague sensation fabric rustling, maybe a muscle twitch, and because it fits the possible phone vibration schema,
it mislabels it. It says, aha, that's the vibration I was waiting for. It's basically choosing relevance, or what it thinks is relevant, over strict accuracy. It's a filtering mistake driven by expectation.
But wait, isn't that kind of risky? Or a brain just overriding reality based on what we want or expect to happen? Is that trade-off, speed versus accuracy, always helpful here?
That's a great point. Usually this kind of filtering is adaptive. Quick reactions are good for survival. But modern tech kind of hijacks this system. Which brings us to the research on predictors. What actually makes someone more likely to experience PVS?
Yeah, what did they find? They looked at phone habits, stress, general tendency towards hallucinations, right? What came out on top?
The results were really clear. One factor stood out way above the others: problematic phone use.
Okay, define problematic use. Is it just about how many hours you're on your phone?
It's a bit more than just screen time. It's measured using psychological scales, looking at things like phone addiction tendencies, excessive use, things like compulsively checking your phone, needing it first thing in the morning, feeling anxious if you can't check it, that kind of thing.
Right, the obsessive stuff.
Yeah, and people who scored high on those measures, they reported significantly more phantom vibrations. And this was true regardless of their other psychological traits.
So it's less about just having the phone physically present and more about the mental and emotional dependence on it, that feeling of needing to be connected.
That seems to be the core of it. That constant need, that emotional stake in getting a notification keeps you in this state of hypervigilance. And that state makes these sensory misinterpretations way more likely. It basically fuels that hypothesis-guided search we talked about.
Okay, so problematic use is number one. What about just general stress? You mentioned that was a predictor too.
It was. Perceived stress showed a significant linear relationship, which means, pretty simply, the more stress people reported feeling, the more often they reported phantom vibrations. No complex curves or anything, just a straight line. More stress, more phantom buzzes.
That makes intuitive sense. When you're stressed and waiting for news, it feels like your phone is buzzing constantly.
Exactly. It validates that common feeling.
And the third factor, what about people who are just naturally more prone to hallucinations in general?
That also played a role.
Yeah.
People who scored higher on general hallucination proneness scales did report more PVS. This finding kind of supports the idea that hallucinations exist on a spectrum,
A continuum.
Yeah.
From totally normal stuff like PVS all the way to things that are clinically significant.
Right. It's not just an on-off switch. It's a range of perceptual experiences.
Okay, so we've got problematic use as the big one. Stress as a clear contributor. But there's one cognitive skill that feels like it should prevent this. Knowing if a feeling came from outside or just from inside your own head.
Source monitoring, right? Did that make a difference?
This is maybe the most surprising part of the research, actually. They tested source monitoring ability, that skill of telling apart internal thoughts or feelings from external events, and found it was not related to how often people felt phantom vibrations.
Wait, really? So someone who's normally great at knowing if they just imagined hearing something versus actually hearing it is just as likely to get phantom vibrations as someone who's not so good at that?
Seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what the data showed. The lack of a connection is really telling.
What does it tell us?
Well, the thinking is that it suggests PVS isn't caused by a fundamental breakdown in that internal versus external distinction. Because PVS is so common, experienced by almost everyone, maybe source monitoring ability just isn't the right way to measure differences here. So it's not about individual skill failing. It's more that the whole situation, the constant expectation, the importance we place on the phone, just overwhelms that system for pretty much everyone.
That seems to be the idea. The environment itself, this hyper-connected state, might just push past our usual cognitive checks and balances, regardless of how good those checks normally are. It becomes this almost universal experience.
Okay, so the brain is primed by this hypothesis-guided search, expecting a buzz. But where does the sheer intensity of that expectation come from? We know stress plays a role, but what about the link between PVS and, diagnosed anxiety?
Oh, the connection there is really striking, especially when you look at groups under intense pressure. There was a study focusing specifically on nursing students.
Okay, high-stress environment.
Definitely. And they found a very, very significant link between students experiencing PVS or PRS and scoring high on measures of severe anxiety. Get this. Almost 80%, 79.7% of the students who felt phantom alerts also tested in the severe anxiety range.
Wow, nearly 4 out of 5. That's huge. It feels like the technology meant to connect us might actually be amplifying distress.
It certainly correlates strongly. And maybe the best illustration of this stress link comes from a longitudinal study, one that followed people over time. They looked at medical interns.
Internship. Probably peak stress time for many doctors.
Exactly. Known for insane hours, sleep deprivation, huge responsibility. The researchers tracked how often these interns experienced PVS and PRS before, during, and after their internship year.
I bet the numbers went way up during the internship.
Dramatically. During the most intense, stressful part of the internship, the prevalence of PVS and PRS shot up to almost 96%, nearly universal.
96%.
But here's the key part. After the internship ended, when the pressure dropped, The rates of PBS and PRS went back down.
So it tracks the stress level almost directly.
It really suggests stress acts as a powerful trigger, maybe even a temporary one for some people. When anxiety spikes, the brain just goes into overdrive with that expectation filter.
This state of being constantly on, always anticipating, that really defines this whole hyper-connected mindset, doesn't it? It feels like we've gone beyond just using our phones to having this kind of anxious dependence on them.
Absolutely. And that mindset leads to other related issues, like nomophobia.
Nomophobia, no mobile phone phobia.
Exactly. It's the actual fear or anxiety people feel when they're without their phone or can't get a signal.
I have to admit, seeing my battery hit 5% definitely causes a little internal panic. Is that nomophobia kicking in?
It could be leaning that way. Nomophobia often shows up as behaviors like never turning the phone off, constantly checking it even when you're not expecting anything, keeping it by the bed. Feeding that anxiety.
Right. And that constant checking, that hypervigilance just keeps priming the brain for that phantom buzz, right? Back to the hypothesis-guided search.
Precisely. The anxiety from nomophobia basically guarantees you're going to make those source monitoring mistakes more often. The phone becomes this crucial lifeline for social connection, for work, for validation, so any potential signal feels incredibly important.
Okay, so behavior and anxiety are shaping our perception in the moment. But what about the bigger picture? Is all this constant digital interaction actually changing our brains physically? Is there evidence of rewiring?
Yes, absolutely. This is where cognitive neuroscience comes in and confirms what we see in behavior through brain plasticity. Our brains aren't fixed, they adapt. And intensive use of things like touch screens is physically changing our sensory circuits.
How do they know that? How can they see that change?
Well, researchers used EEG, which measures electrical activity in the brain, to look at the somatosensory cortex. That's the part that processes touch. They compared heavy touchscreen users to people who didn't use them much.
What did they find?
It was pretty remarkable. They found that heavy touchscreen use literally reorganizes that part of the brain map. Specifically, they saw increased cortical potentials, basically more brain power and physical representation dedicated to the thumb and the index finger.
The exact fingers we use most for scrolling and tapping, so the brain is dedicating more resources to the body parts doing the digital work?
That's exactly what it looks like. Powerful evidence of this brain adapting. And what's really fascinating is how quickly it happens.
How quickly?
The size of that brain representation actually correlated with how much the person had used their phone recently, like day-to-day fluctuations.
Yeah.
It shows the brain is constantly reshaping itself based on our digital habits. It's incredibly plastic.
So does that mean if I stopped using my thumb so much, that part of the brain map might shrink back down?
The findings strongly suggest that, yes. It highlights how dynamic that cortex is. Our digital habits aren't just trivial actions. They're actively shaping our neural hardware, changing how we process touch.
And it's not just touch, right? Aren't there broader effects being seen, especially in younger people?
That's right. Other studies, particularly looking at adolescents, have found correlations between heavy digital media use and other changes. Things like lower cognitive empathy.
Lower empathy.
Yes, the ability to understand others' perspectives. And also physical changes, like differences in the gray matter volume in the amygdala.
The amygdala. That's a key area for emotion, right? Fear, anxiety.
Exactly. So finding structural changes there linked to digital use is significant. It takes PBS beyond just an annoying buzz. It suggests our relationship with these devices might be reshaping not just how we feel touch, but how we process emotions and connect with others, potentially fueling the very anxiety that makes us feel the phantom buzzes. Okay, so if we agree that phantom vibrations are largely driven by this anxious waiting because the signal itself is so crude, then you could argue the ghost in the pocket is really a design problem.
A failure of design. How so?
Well, think about a standard phone vibration. It's basically one bit of information. On or off F, something happened. That's it. It tells you when, but it gives you zero clue about what or how important it is.
Right, so you have to check. I think I read somewhere that almost half of people check immediately.
Yeah, it's something like 44.7%. That immediate check breaks your focus, wastes time, and just reinforces that whole compulsive checking loop.
So the solution would be notifications that actually give you more information through touch alone. Smarter haptics.
Exactly. The field looking into this is human-computer interaction, HCI. And researchers are exploring ways to create richer haptic languages. Maybe different vibration frequencies, different rhythms, different patterns could mean different things. The standard motor in most phones is just not very expressive.
Okay, so we need richer data through touch. I know you looked into a specific study from Japan that tried something really ambitious with this, right? Syllabic vibration.
That's the one. A really fascinating attempt. Their goal was to encode 3 distinct pieces of information into a sequence of vibrations, so you could potentially know the urgency, the app, and even the sender without looking at your phone.
3 pieces of information just from buzzing. How did they structure that?
Okay, so the first piece was urgency. That was pretty simple, just 2 levels, neutral or high. They used the number of short, like 80 millisecond buzzes to signal that. More buzzes meant more urgent.
Makes sense. Quick, simple distinction. What was the second piece, the communication channel?
Right, the communication type. Was it a phone call, an email, a Twitter notification, a message online? Here's where the syllabic idea came in. They assigned vibration patterns based on the syllables of the app's name. Think kind of like Morse code short vibrations, maybe 200 meters for dots, and longer ones, maybe 500 meters for dashes.
So you might feel like short for Twitter or long short for email, and you'd know the source instantly. Okay, that's clever. But the third piece sounds like the real challenge. The sender's name. How on earth do you turn a name into a vibration pattern?
This was the most complex part. The sender's name. They broke it down by character pronunciation, based on Japanese syllables. Consonants were turned into vibrations of different durations. Vowels determined the silent intervals between those vibrations.
Whoa, okay, so not just short or long buzzes, but precisely timed lengths of vibration and precisely timed pauses in between.
Exactly. Each consonant got a unique vibration length, maybe from 100 milliseconds up to a full second, in steps of 100 meters. And each vowel got a unique pause length, again in 100 meters steps. Maybe 100 meters to 500 meters.
Can you give an example?
Sure, they use the name Toyota, so Toyota. The T might be a 400 meters buzz. The O vowel following it determines the pause, say 500 meters. Then the Y consonant might be an 800 meters buzz, followed by another O pause, then the final T buzz and the A pause.
That is incredibly detailed, time-sensitive information packed into just feeling. Could people actually decode that reliably? Did it work?
Well, yes and no. It really depended on where the phone was. When they tested just the first 2 segments, urgency and communication type, and the person held the phone directly in their hand, accuracy was amazing, like up to 98% correct, even with sound blocked out.
Why so good in the hand?
Because your hand, especially your fingertips, is packed with mechanoreceptors, the sensors for touch. It has really high resolution for feeling these subtle differences.
That's not usually where we feel phantom vibrations, is it? It's usually the pocket. What happened when they put the phone in a trouser pocket like normal?
That's where the whole system kind of fell apart. Performance plummeted. When they tested the full 3-part notification, urgency type, and sender's name with the phone in the pocket and sound insulation, well, it was a total failure.
How bad? What was the accuracy?
For the full pattern in the pocket with sound blocked, 0%.
0. After all that complex encoding, just gone.
Pretty much wiped out. The pocket is just a terrible environment for this kind of subtle haptic information.
Why? What's the problem with the pocket?
2 main things. First, the fabric itself acts like a filter or damper. It just absorbs or smooths out those precise timings. The difference between a 400 meters buzz and an 800 meters buzz gets lost.
Okay, the fabric muffles it.
Right. And second, the skin on your hip or thigh, where the phone usually rests, just doesn't have nearly the same density of those touch receptors as your hand. It simply can't distinguish those fine-grained temporal patterns. It can't decode 400 meters vibration, 500 meters pause.
Did they try other locations, like a shirt pocket, maybe closer to bone, less padding?
The study mainly focused on the trouser pocket because that's the most common carry spot and where PVS usually happens. But yeah, the results really highlighted how poorly suited the hip area is for receiving complex tactile info because of the low receptor density and all the interference.
So if the pure feeling wasn't getting through, did people find other ways to figure out the patterns?
They did, but it wasn't ideal. Participants often ended up relying on the sound the vibration motor made, that little rattle inside the phone.
So they were hearing the pattern, not just feeling it.
Exactly. Especially when trying to tell apart names that had similar syllable structures, like itu versus situ. The vibration patterns felt too similar, but maybe they sounded slightly different. It showed just how hard it is to rely solely on touch for this kind of complex, timed information.
Which basically leaves us back where we started, doesn't it? With a vibration that just tells us something happened, forcing us to look, feeding the checking habit, and leaving the door wide open for that ghost in the pocket. Hashtag tag outro first.
So yeah, if we pull all this together, the picture that emerges of this ghost in the pocket is pretty clear, I think. These phantom notifications, they aren't just some random glitch.
Right. They're not really a clinical thing either in most cases.
No. They seem to be a real, measurable, physiological sign of living this hyperconnected life, often a quite anxious one.
We've pinned it down as this normative hallucination, explained by that hypothesis-guided search idea. Our brains are so busy expecting an alert, mostly because of our problematic phone habits, that they just misread other feelings as the buzz we're waiting for.
And that expectation gets cranked way up by stress. That direct linear link between how stressed you feel and how often you get phantom buzzes is solid evidence, whether it's clinical anxiety or just the pressure of a tough job.
Like those medical interns, yeah. More stress equals more phantom buzzes.
Yeah.
Tracks.
And crucially, the biggest driver seems to be that problematic phone use itself. That compulsive checking, the anxiety of being disconnected nomophobia that predicts PVS frequency better than anything else, better than general proneness to hallucination, even better than your basic cognitive ability to tell internal from external signals.
Which really puts the focus on our behavior, doesn't it? Our relationship with the device.
It really does. And current design doesn't help. The basic vibration only tells us when, not what, which forces the check, which reinforces the anxiety loop.
And those attempts to build smarter haptics, like the syllabic vibration, really clever tech, but they smash into the wall of physics and biology.
Exactly. You can encode all this data, but if putting it in your pocket wipes it out because the fabric filters it and your skin isn't sensitive enough,
then the system fails right where it's needed most. It works great in the hand, but the ghost lives in the pocket.
Meanwhile, our brains are physically changing, adapting to this constant interaction. More brain space for our tapping thumbs, potentially even changes in emotional processing centers like the amygdala. We're literally wiring ourselves for these devices.
Which leads to a final thought, doesn't it? If our brains adapt this fast to relatively simple tech like phones, what happens next?
Right. As we move towards things like augmented reality, virtual reality, wearables, tech that delivers much richer, more constant sensory feedback directly onto our bodies, what new kinds of normative hallucinations, what new dependencies, what new anxieties will our incredibly adaptable nervous systems cook up then?